Chapter 4, Lesson 5, Add and Subtract Mixed Numbers. You will be able to add and subtract mixed numbers. Line up the problem vertically, up and down. Find the LCD, least common denominator, and find equivalent fractions accordingly. Then perform the operation. Find each sum or difference. So letter A, we already have common denominators. So I'm going to line these up vertically. 7 and 4/9 plus 10 and 2/9. Take care of your fractions first. 4/9 plus 2/9 is 6/9. And now your numbers, 7 plus 10 is 17. 6/9 can be reduced by dividing numerator and denominator by 3. And you get a final sum of 17 and 2/3. Six and 1/8 plus 2 and 5/8. The denominators are the same, so we just need to add. 1/8 plus 5/8 equals 6/8. And 6 plus 2 equals 8. 6/8 can be reduced by dividing numerator and denominator by 2, and we get a final sum of 8 and 3/4. Now we have different denominators. We have 8 and 5/6 minus 2 and 1/3. The least common denominator between 6 and 3 is 6. So this fraction, I really only multiply by 1, so it stays the same. And this fraction, I will multiply by 2, so it becomes a 6. So we then have 8 and 5/6 minus 2 and 2/6. Now our operation is subtraction. 5/6 minus 2/6 is 3/6. And 8 minus 2 is 6. 3/6 can be reduced. Divide numerator and denominator by 3. And we get 6 and 1/2 as our difference. Letter D, 5 and 1/5 plus 2 and 3/10. I need common denominators. My least common denominator would be 10. So I'll multiply the first fraction by 2 and the other fraction by 1. And we get 5 and 2/10 plus 2 and 3/10. 2/10 plus 3/10 is 5/10. And 5 plus 2 is 7. 5/10 can be reduced. Divide by 5 on numerator and denominator. And we get 7 and 1/2 as our sum. Letter E. 13 and 7/8 minus 9 and 3/4. Common denominator is 8. Multiply your first fraction by 1. Your second fraction by 2. You get 13 and 7/8 minus 9 and 6/8. 7/8 minus 6/8 is 1/8. And 13 minus 9 is 4. No need to reduce. Our difference is 4 and 1/8. Letter F. 8 and 2/3 minus 2 and 1/2. The common denominator between 3 and 2 is 6. So multiply our first fraction by 2 and our second fraction by 3. And we get 8 and 4/6 minus 2 and 3/6. 4/6 minus 3/6 is 1/6. 8 minus 2 is 6. And there is no need to reduce. 6 and 1/6 is our difference. Letter G. 1 and 5/9 plus 4 and 1/6. Our common denominator here would be 36. Multiply your first fraction by 4 and your second fraction by 6. And actually, we could also do 18 as our common denominator as well. That would be the smaller one. But as long as you get a common denominator, it doesn't matter. You'll just have to reduce at the end. So 1 and 20 over 36 plus 4 and 6 over 36 would be 26 over 36. And 1 plus 4 is 5. And now we need to reduce. We can definitely divide by 2. We would get 5 and 13 over 18. Letter H. 10 and 5 over 6 minus 2 and 1/2. Our common denominator is 6. Multiply your first fraction by 1, your second fraction by 3. And we get 10 and 5 over 6 minus 2 and 3 over 6. 5 over 6 minus 3 over 6 is 2 over 6. And 10 minus 2 is 8. Reduce 2 over 6 by dividing numerator and denominator by 2. And you get a final difference of 8 and 1/3. Letter I. 12 and 1/2 plus 3 and 3/4. Common denominator is 4. So multiply your first fraction by 2 and your second fraction by 1. We get 12 and 2/4 plus 3 and 3/4. 2/4 plus 3/4 is 5/4. And 12 plus 3 is 15. Now here's an instance where we end up with an improper fraction. When that happens, we need to change that into a mixed number, and then we'll incorporate the 15. So let's just focus on the 5 over 4. That would be 1 and 1/4 as a mixed number. Bring down that 15 and add it to the 1. So we're pretty much carrying the whole amount to our whole number over here. So we would have 16 and 1/4. So again, we take the whole number from this improper and add it to the next side, or carry it to the next side. Now sometimes after you make your equivalent fractions using your least common denominator, you can't perform the operation. It is at this time that you borrow from the whole number. Another way you can solve it is by changing the mixed numbers to improper fractions. Complete the following problems, reduce if possible. So letter A and B are the same problem, and I'm going to show you how to do it both ways. So we would do 2 and 1/3, we're still going to write it vertically, minus 1 and 2/3. Now, we can't do 1/3 minus 2/3, so we need to borrow from the whole number. We need to borrow from the 2 and make it a 1. Now here's where it gets tricky. One whole amount is the denominator. So 1 whole, what I'm really doing is I'm adding 3 over 3. Because remember, 3 divided by 3 is 1. So this would become a 1 and 1/3 plus 3/3 is 4/3 minus 1 and 2/3. Another way to think of it is you basically borrow and add the denominator up to your numerator. You could do it that way as well. Now we can subtract. 4/3 minus 2/3 is 2/3. And 1 minus 1 is 0. So 2/3 is our difference. Let's do the same problem but make them improper. So 2 and 1/3 minus 1 and 2/3. You definitely need common denominators, which we have. So now let's make them improper. And a lot of you may prefer this method better. 2 and 1/3 to make it improper. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So that would be 7/3 minus 1 times 3 is 3, plus 2 is 5, 5/3. 7/3 minus 5/3 is 2/3. And if you look back at letter A, we did get the same answer. Whatever you prefer to do is perfectly fine by me. Letter C. 7 minus 1 1/2. Now, we need common denominators. So I know I need a denominator of 2. And right now, we don't have anything extra. So we really have 0 halves. If we're going to borrow, we're going to make this a 6 and then add 2 to the numerator. So it would be 6 and 2 over 2 minus 1 and 1 over 2. 2 over 2 minus 1 over 2 is 1 over 2, and 6 minus 1 is 5. So 5 1/2. Letter D. 5 3/8 minus 4 11/12. Our common denominator here would be 24, so before I do anything, I'm going to make these common denominators. Multiply the first fraction by 3 and the second fraction by 2. And we would get 5 9/24 minus 4 22/24. And again, I can't do 9 minus 22, so I'm going to borrow from the 5 and make it a 4, and then add the denominator. So I would get 5, and 24 plus 9 is 33, so 33 over 24, minus 4 and 22 over 24. Oops, and this would be a 4, not a 5. So I borrowed, I forgot about that. Okay, so 33 minus 22 is 11 over 24. And 4 minus 4 is 0. So our answer is 11 over 24. (11 2/5) minus 2 3/5. This time I'll do the improper fraction way. So they have common denominators already, which is good. Now let's make them improper fractions. 11 times 5 is 55, plus 2 is 57. So this is 57 over 5 minus 2 times 5 is 10, plus 3 is 13, so 13 over 5. Then subtract them. 7 minus 3 is, we have a 4, 44 over 5. And now we have to change it back to a mixed number. 5 goes into 44 8 times, which is 40, and there are 4 left over. So 8 and 4/5. Letter F, 8 minus 3 and 3/4. Remember, this doesn't have a fraction, so it's really 0/4. And again, I'll show you the mixed number method. 8 times 4 is 32, plus 0 is still 32. So 32 over 4 minus 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15 over 4. And then subtract, and I'm going to do the subtraction off to the side. So we get 17/4. Change it back to a mixed number. 4 goes into 17 4 times with 1 remaining. So 4 and 1/4. Letter G. 3 and 1/4 minus 1 and 3/4. I will do improper fractions. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13, so 13/4 minus 1 times 4 is 4, plus 3 is 7, so 7/4. 13/4 minus 7/4 is 6/4. Change it to a mixed number. It would be 1 and 2/4, which can be reduced to 1 and 1/2. (16) minus 5 and 5/6. Again, it has 0/6 because it's a whole number. We'll do the borrowing again. It doesn't matter which method you choose. I'm just trying to give you a mix of both here. This would become a 15, and I would add 6 because that's the denominator. And I would get 15 and 6/6 minus 5 and 5/6. Subtract the fractions first to get 1/6. And 15 minus 5 is 10. We cannot reduce that in any way, so 10 and 1/6. (14 and 1/6 minus 7 and 1/3. Our common denominator is 6, so I need to multiply the second fraction by 2 and the first fraction by 1. And I would get 14 and 1/6 minus 7 and 2/6. I'm going to borrow again with this one. 14 becomes a 13, and I add the denominator, which is 6/6, to the top. So I would have 13 and 7/6 minus 7 and 2/6. Subtract the fractions and get 5/6, and 13 minus 7 is 6. That cannot be reduced, so our answer is 6 and 5/6.